say a skater stick, should come up to the certain height if you're standing on your skates, maybe your chin or something. But we don't really have that same rule for goaltenders. But parents, especially if you've got the youngest goaltenders out there, often wonder, can they cut the shaft down? Because they get these huge sticks for their young kids and they want to make it easier to work with. So often for years, if you checked out on the internet forums, you would see people screaming that you can't cut down a goalie stick because you're going to change the balance of the stick. And sure, it makes a difference. But as you and Cam proved last week, balance is in the hand of the holder. There is no right answer. A stick that's too large, though, or too long will be too hard for a young goalie to handle, period. So cutting down a stick for a young goalie to make it more manageable is okay. Don't just take that from me. We've heard it from all kinds of coaches and goaltenders, and we'll talk about that in a second. One thing I often have heard people say is, are you going to do some irretrievable damage by cutting the carbon fiber in the stick? People say that if you get a nick in carbon, it's going to create a flaw that will lead to breakage. I don't even know if that's true anymore with modern sticks, but that's probably where it came from. All I can say is people cut them down. I have cut them down with a regular saw. I just pull that plastic plug from the top part that I've cut off and put it back in the shaft after cutting, and away we go. Now, I can't speak for what that's going to do for your warranty. Probably it is an issue, but having my kid comfortable on the ice has always been number one for me. Again, will it mess with the balance? Well, all the major companies are now making sticks with shorter shafts, and I'm not aware of any change they've made to the paddle to offset that in terms of the balance. In fact, you can go onto their customizers and get the identical stick in different shaft lengths. So I think that kind of proves the point that changing the shaft length is not the end of the world. Now, the XF Pro is following a recent trend with sticks being a little bit shorter. Bauer brought in the Hyperlight sticks that were shorter. True has theirs. It's the hazardous one, I think, isn't it, Woody, that they've cut down to make it shorter. This was all popularized, of course, by Carey Price, who cut his sticks down several inches and told us it was about better handling of the puck in tight around his feet. So companies first made that an option on the customizer, and then now they've made it stock with a lot of their sticks. So that happens to bring down the weight for those people who are worried about counting grams and so on. Now, on the other side of the fence, we've got parents who don't want to cut them down, and they want to buy a larger stick that will last longer as their child grows. I get that goalie is expensive, and when they're younger, the stick is less likely to break. So maybe you think you can get a couple of years out of it. And we all, of course, wonder about that old bigger is better. I remember Woody using longer paddles with that in mind. I'm, shall we say, average height, but I always used the longest paddle I could because of the size. We, and I'm talking about us older guys, used to size our sticks so that when we were in our stance, there wasn't any what we call double coverage. We'd use a longer paddle because we didn't want our blocker overlapping with our pads and our stance and covering the same bit of net with two pieces of equipment. And while it is okay to look bigger, probably is good to look bigger, proper save execution and mobility are way more important. So today the trend is to use shorter paddles, with NHL goalies we know going down to 25, even 24 in some cases, not to mention shaping the top of the paddle that lets them hold it even lower down, as you will have seen in articles over at ingolmag.com with guys like Sergei Bobrovsky, Marc-Andre Fleury, who himself talks about Carey Price. Why? The number reason I hear is simple. How many stick saves do you make standing up? Pretty much zero. So now we like to size our paddle so when you're in the butterfly, you can hold it to make a stick save comfortably. If we were on video, we could show people what that's all about. But this isn't really a lesson on how to size your stick so much as it is just a bit of information that we wanted to share with parents to give them sort of permission to try different things and experiment a little bit. By the way, having your stick a little bit or your pad a little bit shorter also makes it easier to protect the crease in ways that we saw with that Bill Ranford video, for example. Look, if you're out there trying to save a little bit of money or you want to look a little bit larger by getting a larger stick, you're more than likely going to be impairing your kids' performance. You'll reduce their mobility, you'll reduce their ability to make stick saves because the stick shaft will be more awkward. You can open up holes in the butterfly, and they're probably going to have trouble learning to handle the puck too. If it's about money, and I get it, may I suggest that if you're in the sizes with kids where there are different options, it's okay to go for the more affordable sticks. They might be a little bit heavier, but only to an absolutely elite goalie are they going to know the difference. And most of us will be just fine in that lower price point. Maybe it even makes it easier to get sticks more often as your child grows as a result. So size it properly, and maybe next year, if it's time to get something larger, you could look at even selling that old one to a family with a younger goaltender. Of course, if you're that age where the shots are hard enough to go through multiple sticks a year, just get the right size. As I mentioned, it's almost impossible here to tell you, though, exactly how to size them. So give Cam a call or drop by the hockey shop or your local retailer. Talk to somebody who knows what they're doing, and they will help you get your kid sized properly for a sick.
I would say that at the ages where you're most likely to have to cut it down, because if you get to you're getting into that taller, closing on 6 feet above the hutch average height, just a bit. You probably can get it at a length you like it with so many options, as you mentioned, of shorter sticks. So if you're cutting it down for younger kids, probably not at a point where the shot velocity is breaking it anyways, in terms of avoiding that warranty by doing so. Just one thing to consider.
Also true. Yeah. So try some experiments. You can also borrow sticks from other goaltenders, as I often see kids doing at camps. One of those other little bits of value when you go to a good goalie camp is the kids will trade off gear a little bit and see what they like. And that's a good way of learning. Okay, thanks for joining us for some parent stuff. If you do have questions, as always, parents@ingoalmag.com, and we'll see if we can address some of those for you, or just tell us what you're thinking about the same topic, and we'll share some of your thoughts with everybody. Okay, Woody, our featured guest this week is presented by NHL Sense Arena VR, Devin Levi, recorded in person in Kelowna. And this is where I tend to say some nice things about NHL Sense Arena. Of course, it's an incredible VR tool for goaltenders, with realistic shots even from NHL players, great drills, training programs with new ones added all the time, including the one that was just released from former PHF goalie and now NCAA coach Abby Ives. And you've heard here how goalies right up to the NHL use it. Even Joey Decord using it to warm up and between periods of an actual NHL game. But I think this week I'll just leave it at this, because if you listen to this week's interview with Devin Levi, he'll tell you why he uses NHL Sense Arena. Because it came up in your conversation, Woody, and that's about as real as it gets.
Yeah, and you'll hear it early on in the conversation. It comes up from him. So, because last time we talked to him, I knew he was an avid user, but I forgot to ask, which tells you about my skills as an interviewer, especially given we're sponsored by them. This time, I forgot to make a note to ask, but he mentioned it earlier as one of the tools that evolved in terms of how he uses it during this season in the NHL. And so it naturally added a note to my go back to this, and he did, and got into the exact way he uses it and how that's changed and how that's evolved. So further validation at the pro level that this is a legitimate tool. I also think it's important to have that validation if you're a young goalie out there and you're worried about what other people might think if you take it to the rink as part of your preparation to play. Listen, some of the best in the game, whether it's Joey Decord, whether it's Devin Levi, are using this as a tool in that manner. So there's no shame in doing it yourself. We heard Joey Decord talk about using it between periods to dial in his glove. If it's good enough for the best, it's good enough for you. And it's always nice to sort of have that reinforcement from the guys at the higher level that they're not shy about talking about virtual reality as a tool to get better. And Devin does just that as part of an interview that covers a lot of different things.
Can you set the scene for that interview? Because as people listen, they're going to hear a bit of a different sound. A little bit of echo in there, maybe how it sounds when you're chatting in an empty dressing room.
Which is where we had this conversation after a nice time with Devin up in Kelowna. And I will say that he was very gracious with his time for both this interview and a little bit of video work. We've got some video drills coming at ingoalmag.com featuring him and Marco Raimondo last summer in Montreal. Not always the best place in terms of sound quality to sit in a locker room at the local rink, in this case, West Kelowna, but a great spot, a natural setting where the goalies are comfortable. And so that's where we did it. And I think you'll hear that in this interview because Devin is pretty relaxed and comfortable in the conversation.
I actually think it sounds fantastic, Woody. It just sounds different. One of the things that's really cool about it is it feels like you're sitting in a rink. And you know, rinks have this look, they have this feel about them as you walk in that just feels like home. So I think it's great that you did it there. And with that, Kevin Woodley, ladies and gentlemen, write down the date, Monday, July 29th. Kevin Woodley was speechless. Kevin Woodley and Devin Levi chatting in Kelowna, BC.
I had nothing to add. Really excited to welcome back to the In Goal Radio podcast. Second time, and in just a year, less than a year since we saw you in Montreal, Devin Levi, coming off your first full pro season. I want to talk about the lessons from it. Looking back, what stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great year. Learned a lot. I thought I got a lot of experience. Playing a full season is definitely different than playing 7 games at the end of the year after my college year. So
and just schedule wise, I would imagine.
For sure. Honestly, that was probably the biggest jump. I think I played 50 games this year, which is 15 games more than I think I've ever played. Plus, all the games that you were backing up, and it was definitely a different schedule to try to manage. There's the physical side where you want to be getting your work in, but you don't want to be overexerting yourself. So it's really trying to fit. Like for me, it was figuring out what do I want to start practice with and what do I want to end practice with. Having those good intentions, and regardless, like if it's a good day, a bad day, just making sure I'm getting my work in. I have the tendency to want to stay out for like an extra 20, 30 minutes, feel the puck if, practice wasn't great that day. But really just having a good focus going into practice, getting good work in. And then, if I want more reps, maybe, going, watching some video, doing some VR instead, something that, I could give my body a little bit of a rest, because the most important thing is being fresh on game day, mentally and physically. So that was kind of the battle to try to manage that. The physical part was probably easier than the mental part. Because mentally it's easy to, be thinking about hockey all day, for me at least, because, I had school as a distraction the year before where, I could only focus on hockey so much of the day. And then the other part of the day is dedicated to my academics. And this year was really the first full year that like I could just be hockey. So I learned how to manage my time a little bit, having some things to do away from the rink, some hobbies that, you could take your mind off the game and then be even more fresh going into the next morning.
Not that having hobbies is a bad thing, but sounds like you almost had to force yourself to take brain breaks from hockey a little bit. Is that what you're saying? Sure. Like you had to have something else.
Yeah. Really finding balance in your everyday life. It helped me show up to the next day to the rink with a little bit more energy, a little bit better focus. I started to realize that, the more time I spend on, thinking about the game or at the rink or doing some extra stuff, it takes out of my next day a little bit. I feel like the quality of my reps are maybe a little bit lower. So really this year was just focusing on quality instead of quantity, because you're getting that quantity in game. So when you're in practice mode, you have to be really smart about, what you want to work on and what you want to do. Because if you're overdoing it in practice, games are going to be really hard. And then recovering after games is that much harder. So for me, it was really finding that balance. And Mike Condon helped me a lot with that at school, actually. He was always telling me like, hey, do you need this? Do you need to do this? So it was just kind of figuring out what I need and what I don't need, just so I'm not in burnout mode.
I was going to say the recovery is a lot different when there's a game 2 nights from now as opposed to the following weekend. Like when you were in college, there's so much gaps there.
Yeah, at school, you get 4 days of practice leading up to your games, and you get 2 games, you get a day off after, and then it's a little bit more of a scheduled approach to the season, where mentally you kind of just know what you have to do when you have to do it. It's the same thing every week. I'm in my routine. It takes that thinking and that planning out of it. But this year it was kind of figure it out on the go. That also takes a little bit of mental energy too. So being able to kind of manage myself, my energy, really understand what I need, what I don't need was really important, because you could do everything and do everything else that every other goalies are doing, and that could burn you out. Do you need that? Maybe not. So just really listening to your body.
How'd you prioritize those decisions? What I need, what I don't need? I guess each one would be unique.
Yeah.
Was there a process whereby you're trying to figure out okay, this I really can live without, but this I really need?
It's just experience.
Trial and error?
Yeah, it's